Good morning. My name is Benjamin Smith, part of Group 3. We were representing Canada. Today's brief will be Cybersecurity Risk Assessment. Today's table of contents for the agenda, we will cover an overview, current capabilities, the current threat, the cyber offensive warfare, speak on Canada's readiness, discuss risk, recommendations, and we have our references at the end. So I'm not going to spend too much time going over our vulnerability matrix. There's a lot of information and detail on here. I'll cover more of the bigger picture items in subsequent slides. However, these are some of the current threats we have assessed. And here are some of our emerging threats, particularly as it relates to advancements in technology. So with some of our current threats, our biggest concern is state actors, which are organizations that are controlled or funded, backed by some of the various ways, but they are an arm that is directly controlled of a nation state or state actor. Non-state actors are various organizations that are either criminal, hacktivists, ideologically minded, but the key thing there is they are not covered, or correction, they are not funded or controlled by the arm of a government. And lastly, insider threat, that can be employees within our own organization, kind of earmarked within insider threat too, could be our Canada's own citizens. But really what we're talking about there is people who have privileged access. Slide. All right, so for state actors are generally the most powerful adversarial threats that I'm going to mention today. Typically, they're well-funded, trained, and backed by an established or legitimate government. Some of the Five Eyes adversaries include China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Note this is not a static list. For example, the Soviet Union and the United States, as well as along with other allied powers, were very close, to the point that there was information sharing during World War II. But as World War II drew to a close and the Nazi regime collapsed, that quickly spiraled into approximately a 50-year Cold War as the adversaries, as were once allies, became adversaries almost immediately. Excuse me. So with our adversaries, the United States has generally been the primary target of cyber attacks. However, Canada is not immune by any means. Our adversaries will typically use tactics to obscure their identity in order to remain some level of deniability. Particularly Russia and China will often claim deniability, deny that anything to do with or supporting or endorsing the actions that originated from their countries. Which brings us to the Advanced Persistent Threat, APT. Those are tools those are groups that that particularly the Chinese and Russian governments use, not limited to those two. They generally serve to gather information, but they're very, very consistent, well-organized groups that can spread misinformation. They have exceptional hacking capabilities. So first country we'd like to cover is China. They've become quite a growing threat to the Five Eyes nations over the last 10 to 15 years. And unfortunately, there is a continuously deteriorating relationship between several of the Five Eyes nations and the Chinese government. In recent history, they have focused mostly on the theft of intellectual property, and their intent varies simply as threat to replicate their own products in order to generate revenue, as well as being self-sustained, the self-sustainment, direct sale of stolen entertainment. Some examples include of other theft would be the COVID-19 vaccine data that was stolen, as well as theft in any ways to defame or to damage the reputation of any of the Five Eyes nations. The big thing is China will often work to leverage their economic and trade power to avoid any type of reputation damage, public reputation damage, or economic sanctions. An example of them particularly would be trying to strong-arm New Zealand. New Zealand is their second. New Zealand is Chinese second trade partner, And so there's that concern there that they can only do so much to stand up against them, as well as the established issues with the Chinese company Huawei, the tech company. The U.S. essentially has basically banned any Huawei products from our networks within the United States. However, within Canada, some Huawei products are authorized or allowed. An example of concern would be that Huawei established their cell phone 5G towers and the communications equipment, which allegedly has backdoors that allow for intelligence collection by the Chinese government, which is very disputed and denied by the Chinese government. But just an example of how private companies within China, are they really private? Are they really armed? It's a debate, and not something that that the Five Eyes nations and the Chinese government agree on quickly. So are non-state actors. Non-state actors are generally, and that is using very broadly here, generally motivated by financial gain. That is not all inclusive to all non-state actors by any means. Some examples could include any type of ideological group, any type of terrorist group, or a hacktivist group, which they're motivated by political, social influence, or ideological influence. So, however, most non-state actors would fall into the category of being a criminal group. Most notably, recently, Dark Horse with the Colonial Pipeline. When the pipeline hack originally occurred, it was speculated that it was first China, and then was speculated to be a direct arm of one of the Russian ATP groups. Turned out to not be true. That it was a criminal group that belonged to Russia, that stated they had no intent on creating any damage to American critical infrastructure. They were cyber criminals that looked to just make money. However, in doing so, they caused impact to the United States critical infrastructure for fuel, and that was without any intent to actually cause profound shortages of resources, or example, threats to electrical grid or anything in that arena. So for insider threats, just remember that an insider we're really addressing here is anyone who has any type of privileged access at all. This could lead to intentional disruption, damage, or data theft. To include in this arena, we're looking at espionage. To major concerns, to even include espionage within the Five Eyes nations. Yes, we are allies, but there's still an aspect of essential secrecy among the Five Eyes nations. We still spy on each other. We've still been caught doing so, and it creates distrust within the alliance. Aside from intentional means, note that humans are prone to error, and an insider has privileged access and can very easily make a mistake that can lead to a massive data leak or a breach due to not following proper protocol or procedure, complacency, which can lead to the success of a social engineering attack, or not setting a security, not providing a not setting a standard that would allow security to be followed appropriately. So within cyber offensive operations, generally, as we see today, the primary means has been to steal information and gather reconnaissance. However, again, that is not static. These same tactics and techniques and procedures which are used for reconnaissance and data theft can absolutely be used to disable systems that would impact critical infrastructure, most notably when it comes to our electricity. I think the last winter in Texas kind of illustrated what having widespread electrical issues could do to just one state within the country, and that was not during the only urgency there was that it was unexpected winter weather or unseasonal winter weather. So it's one of those things that could be catastrophic if effectively if someone targeted those attacks to impact the critical infrastructure. So Canada's own Communication Security Establishment, CSE, did a report and conducted an assessment that our adversaries to the Five Eyes nations absolutely have the ability to cause catastrophic damage to infrastructure. However, they don't believe the adversaries would intentionally damage infrastructure at that time. They wouldn't intentionally do anything that would lead to death within the current environment. But as I said, the biggest concern is our electricity among all, that everything could come tumbling down very quickly with that one aspect being taken out. So just some examples of recent attacks. So the Russian intelligence security breach with the solar winds, that is still something that's unfolding. Many United States government companies use that software. Microsoft email servers, that was Chinese. And then, as talked about, the Colonial Pipeline, that is just kind of wrapping up now as we brief this. So risk, the biggest thing is, again, is critical infrastructure. That is the biggest weakness, and thankfully it is all tied together with technology, but that also increases the vulnerabilities to the critical infrastructure. So not the official term, but just kind of a cyber arms race, kind of akin to the 20th century nuclear arms race that has kind of been taking place, where at least it's been known that Russia and China have some level of already kind of implanted a level of malicious code within each other's networks that would impact each other's critical infrastructure. And it's basically the concept there is to be used as a deterrent. It's for the mutually assured destruction, more or less similar to the nuclear arms race, where neither one wanted to initiate any type of attack because it would lead to an escalation of attacks, and in the end, it would be a mutually assured destruction. So tremendous risk there if it affects critical infrastructure, because in this case, as we brief this today, there's not a lot of contingencies that can be quickly enacted and redundancies to continue operations within the critical infrastructure if there were to be a catastrophic attack. It wouldn't be something that we would recover from in a matter of days or weeks, if honestly ever, depending on how severe it was. Excuse me. So within Canada, so the Canadian Association of Defence and Security Industries report was not very good for Canada's readiness. Basically deemed that we are ill prepared for a cyber threat. The biggest culprit of this, or biggest causation, would be the bureaucratic process when it comes to purchasing equipment, training individuals, and getting people in positions. Basically, it was too slow. With our current process, it would take 10 years to just prepare the nation for the threat of today, let alone the evolving threat that would appear in 10 years. There's a lot of distrust as a result between the individuals who work for the government and those stakeholders who are actually the ones, the cyber warriors, if you will, if you want to call them that, decision makers as well. That there's with the decisions that have been made through the procurement process, it's clunky, it's slow, and it's ineffective. Unfortunately, he may have had to, but the current head of all things cybersecurity, the CSE, he publicly disagrees with that. Says they have everything they need. I understand he can't acknowledge that they're ill prepared, but he disagrees with the report. This is a third party report that I see has no bias to say otherwise. And the report recommends that we lean towards more of the U.S. model, which relies a lot on private industry to conduct the research in lieu of the current, more bureaucratic government process. So within risk, it would be fantastic if we could just avoid all risk, just shut down all of our borders, all of our networks, to not allow any external threat to come in or out and stay internal, and truly true isolationist. However, that is not feasible, unfortunately, as we sit here today in the interconnected global economy, and that would only deter us from economic growth and everything else. So to that, the other side of the spectrum would just be true risk assessment, true risk acceptance, where the risk is just accepted, we just roll with it, don't make any changes. I agree. I believe that is just beyond cavalier. It is just reckless. So with that, risk mitigation. But before saying anything else, just remember that risk can never be truly mitigated out of existence. There will always be remaining residual risk after our control measures are in place. And unfortunately, anytime you do risk mitigation, almost any time, it's generally true that it's going to lead to some increased cost and inconvenience. Rarely on the other side of that risk mitigation are you faced with something that makes life directly easier when you're in normal operations. It prepares you to avoid contingency operations, but it just should be known that no one people don't generally enjoy when they're restricted in what they can do in their position, or if they have extra steps, or if there's extra security features that slow down their computers. But it's vital in order to just reduce that risk as much as possible. So when it comes to our policy and just kind of people, kind of already said, I second the recommendation from the industry report about the U.S. model. We need to become more agile. We need to get more fluid. We need to be able to hire people quickly, and really tap into the expertise of the private market. The cyber threat and cyber technology changes rapidly, and we need to benefit from that experience in lieu of a much slower bureaucratic process. As well, employee education programs, it is universal. However, humans are the biggest threat, the most consistent threat. We haven't changed along with the technology. Most of the technological defense mechanisms have increased. We've gotten increasingly better at beating the technological threat, but the threat of social engineering, the threat of humans making mistakes has remained constant, if not deteriorated. So employee training programs, so they understand what not to do, why not to do it, and what can happen if they don't do the right thing. It includes drills where they have to sit there and own up that I made this mistake. We caused this hack because, or this data breach because, or data leak. And that includes going all the way up within organizations. So to that, good cyber hygiene, that's just your general best practice stuff at the lowest level. It's very vanilla, but doing the basics will go a long way. Within organizations, mandating, most should have them, but absolutely should have key data logging, which in auditing, and triggered alerts when you have unusual occurrences and anomalies against the baseline, someone has to be notified for action to occur. And as well, kind of falls under good cyber hygiene and the education programs, but when possible, we are smaller than some of our cyber program is smaller than some of our other surrounding nations. However, just the concept of least privilege and separation of duties to mitigate if there is a successful breach, a compromised account, we are mitigating the amount of damage that person with that one account, because they're going to want to escalate they're going to elevate their privilege once they get it, and we need to make it sure so that if that happens, that mitigates the risk of how much damage someone will do once they're in. So additionally, I kind of already mentioned electricity, but really when it comes to contingency plans, and most notably that key phrase of continuing continuity of operations planning, COOP planning, we really need to lean in. I really strongly recommend leaning in to being more able to operate without some of these aspects of critical infrastructure, to return to normal operations as quickly as possible. All these plans we have, everything can be great, but if one major event can occur that can render all of our plans useless, we need to have contingencies and be able to operate outside of that. So some other things we're talking about: policy and people, mobile device management. There's vulnerabilities there when people are carrying issued devices with them. It can provide a direct portal into our data, and as well as private key infrastructure, as mentioned in our last project. Basically, the ability to provide non-repudiation, integrity, and confidentiality of messages with a central key registry. And when possible, just continue VPN usage. That ensures encryption. That ensures that that encrypts the data that is going over unsecure networks, and it is absolutely a vital tool. So technology, kind of, it's in both. I already talked about logging and auditing. Just network hardening in general. Do things that make it that much harder to get into our network. Same with physical security. Provide deterrents and obstacles to make it more challenging to get in. Gates, fences, armed guards, all these things within our facilities. Redundancies within those, having multiple data centers, data backups, make it incredibly difficult to take down. There's not one single point of failure where, hey, they take out this, they take out our whole network. Same idea. Multi-factor authentication, I prefer being something and something you have, so i.e. Tokens with passphrases, and it could even be something you have and then an additional token that you have to wear around your neck. Just the more difficult it is to replicate that, to get around it, the more secure our networks will be. And then within that, or to that, also penetration testing. I recommend we not only contract white hat hackers as much as possible, but incentivize gray hat hackers. Gray hat hackers being those hackers who don't necessarily have a negative view of what you're doing. They're not going to act to maliciously hurt your system. But if they come across a vulnerability or data, they might profit off of by selling that information, say, to a known black hat hacking organization. So basically trying to do whatever you can to get more and more trained people on your side to increasingly build your defenses, and the white hat hackers continuously test that. Find your vulnerabilities, find ways that we didn't know that we could be, that an exploit could occur, and really take full advantage of that. So within that, my final recommendations is that we really need to treat the cyber domain like the physical one. We're kind of quick to invest in land, sea, air, and now even starting to, the United States even has a space force. I think we need to treat the cyber domain the same, if not slightly more important to some degree than those. It shouldn't just be an afterthought. It shouldn't just be something that's cool because it's on the computer. It absolutely provides. It can provide even more vulnerabilities because an attack can be launched and weaken us or damage us, cause us financial or critical infrastructure loss from someone who's not even near us, who isn't even the same hemisphere as us, can do the same damage. In general, that cannot be said for most of the land, sea, and air, or at least we'll be able to say, okay, it's clearly this is where it came from, and this is how to retaliate. I know that no one wants to. It's not fun to spend money. People want to save as much money as possible. People want things as convenient as possible. But really, if mitigation is available and it is feasible, unless it's outrageous cost and it's cost effective, I absolutely think it should be we should spend money on it, and the control measures should be implemented. Recognize and promote these fundamentals, just kind of just doing really good at good cyber hygiene, good at things that just make it that much more difficult to remove some of those very simple vulnerabilities that are present within almost all systems. And just understand that last one, not a recommendation, but just understanding that, hey, humans are the biggest piece of the air, the consistency in the air here. We can get new systems that are really cool and gee whiz and say, oh man, look how awesome this new system is. But if our people who use it are not fundamentally sound, they are even a bigger weakness than the outdated systems. Do I have any questions? Well, I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for listening to my brief. I will be available after the meeting for any additional questions. Please see our references. Thank you and have a great day.